what if the Easter story isn't just, a tragic execution followed by a miraculous revival?
Right. What if there's a whole other layer to it?
Exactly. What if it is actually the ultimate cosmic heist?
I love that framing. It really sets the stage.
Think about it for a second. Like one of those brilliant heist movies, you've got the villain sitting around a table, right? They're celebrating.
Yeah, clinking glasses and everything.
They think they have finally defeated the hero. I mean, they've won, but they are completely unaware that the hero has just walked them directly into a trap.
A trap that they essentially set for themselves.
Yes, a trap that is going to dismantle and, well, just completely destroy their entire empire from the inside out.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't just like a fun modern metaphor. If we look closely at the text, this is the actual theology of the early church.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. So our mission for this deep dive is to act as investigative journalists inside biblical theology.
I am so ready for this.
We are going to look at our sources, heavily guided by the work of the late biblical scholar Michael S. Heiser, and really uncover the behind-the-curtain spiritual warfare of Holy Week.
Because it's all there in the text, right?
It is. We are investigating how Jesus' death and resurrection was this calculated cosmic ambush designed to dethrone the dark powers of the unseen realm.
We are getting right into it today. Now, to set the stage for you, we really have to look at how we typically frame the Easter story.
Right, the standard narrative we all grew up with.
Yeah, exactly. In much of popular evangelical discourse, the Easter message is often reduced almost exclusively to individual salvation.
Like, Jesus died to save me from my sins so that I can go to heaven.
Right. And we want to state very carefully here that is absolutely true. The forgiveness of personal sin is a beautiful, totally essential reality.
Absolutely foundational. Nobody's denying that.
But if that is the only lens we use, we miss a massive thundering backdrop of cosmic conflict. We miss the divine councils and territorial principalities.
Things that the New Testament authors simply assumed their readers understood.
Yeah. If we only read the Bible as a transaction for our personal sins, we lose the incredible dramatic tension of the whole narrative.
Because Jesus wasn't just performing a legal transaction, he was actively waging war against actual spiritual entities.
Literal conscious beings.
Yes, entities who were holding literal geographic and political territory on Earth. I mean, the ancient readers saw the world as occupied territory.
And the Messiah was the invading king coming to take it back.
Exactly.
So this brings up the massive driving question for our deep dive today. If the standard evangelical framing is missing this layer, what are the textual breadcrumbs we need to follow to see the whole picture?
Where do we start?
Yeah, where do we start? Because it feels like a completely different way to read the Bible.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we actually have to rewind the tape thousands of years before the cross.
Okay, how far back are we talking?
Way back. To understand exactly who Jesus was fighting during Holy Week, we have to understand the architecture of Heiser's supernatural worldview.
Which is rooted deeply in the Old Testament.
Right. It begins with the divine council and the cosmic geography of the ancient world.
Wait, let me stop you there. Because if God is omnipotent, why construct a trap at all? I mean, why not just snap his fingers and destroy the rebellious gods?
That is the logical question, right? Why do we even have a narrative of conflict?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It seems overly complicated for an all-powerful being.
It comes down to how God chose to structure his governance over creation. God is sovereign, yes, but the biblical texts reveal that he chose to rule his creation through a family.
A family, so not just humanity.
No, both a human family on earth and a spiritual family in the heavens. This heavenly host, which is often called the divine council, was actually granted genuine free will and delegated authority.
Oh, wow. So they could make real choices.
Exactly. And when you give genuine agency to your creation, you open the door to genuine rebellion.
I guess that makes sense. It's the risk of free will.
Right. God respects his own covenants and the legal architecture of his creation. He doesn't just arbitrarily break the rules. He established.
So he maneuvers within them to achieve justice and redemption.
You nailed it. He plays by his own rules to win the game.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. So we aren't just talking about a vague concept of evil floating around the world like some kind of dark fog.
Not at all.
We are talking about literal, rebellious spiritual beings who were granted territory, abused their power, and actively corrupted humanity.
That is the biblical worldview, yes.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at Babel. Because in our sources, Babel isn't just a children's story about people building a tower and God mixing up their languages because they were getting too arrogant.
Right, it's not just an origin story for different
It's
languages.
a story of cosmic divorce.
That's a great way to put it. At the Tower of Babel, humanity basically rebels against God's command to spread out and fill the earth. They try to draw God down to their terms.
Build a tower to the heavens and make a name for themselves.
Exactly. So God judges them, but the judgment isn't just linguistic, it's a spiritual disinheritance.
Okay, break that down for me.
As Heiser points out, Deuteronomy chapter 32 describes this exact moment. The text basically says that the Most High disinherited the nations of the world and assigned them to the dominion of supernatural sons of God.
Whoa, okay.
God essentially says, if you don't want me to be your God, fine. I am assigning you to lesser divine beings, members of my heavenly council. They will rule over you.
And then he goes and picks his own team.
Right. God immediately goes and calls Abraham to start a new, distinct family, Israel, which will be his own direct portion.
Hold on, I need to push back here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
You're saying God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God. But if I open a lot of standard English Bibles right now to Deuteronomy 32, it says God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of Israel.
That is a phenomenal catch, and it's a huge point of confusion.
So how does Heiser bridge that gap? Are we just changing the text to fit the theory?
No, we aren't changing the text at all. We are actually looking at the oldest available manuscript.
Oh, okay, so there's a translation issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a long time, the dominant Hebrew text, we relied on the Masoretic text, which is medieval said sons of Israel.
Got it.
But when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, which are over 1,000 years older, they explicitly read sons of God, or Bene Elohim in Hebrew.
1,000 years older is a pretty big deal.
Massive. And the ancient Greek translation, the Septuagint, which the apostles used, also translates it as angels of God.
Oh, wow. So the early church read it that way too.
Yes. Heiser argues that the original reading was undoubtedly sons of God, and it perfectly matches the worldview of Psalm 82.
What happens in Psalm 82?
God literally stands in the divine council and judges these specific beings for ruling the nations unjustly. They accepted worship for themselves. They became the corrupt territorial gods of the ancient world.
That entirely shifts how I read the Old Testament. I mean, Israel isn't just surrounded by neighboring tribes with different cultural practices.
No, not at all.
Israel is surrounded by nations ruled by literal, hostile spiritual entities. It's an island of Yahweh's territory in a sea of dark powers.
That is the exact picture the Old Testament is trying to paint.
But our sources mention that Babel wasn't the only cosmic rebellion, right? There is another major one, and this one goes back to Genesis 6.
Right. The rebellion of a specific group of divine beings known in Second Temple Jewish literature, like the Book of 1 Enoch, as the Watchers.
Let's be clear for the listener here. 1 Enoch isn't in most canonical Bibles.
No, it's not.
So why should we care what 1 Enoch says about Genesis 6?
Well, think of 1 Enoch like the cultural water Jesus and his disciples were swimming in.
Okay, so it gives us the context of their world.
Exactly. While it may not be canonical scripture for most Christians today, it was deeply, deeply influential in the first century. The New Testament writers frequently reference it.
Doesn't the book of Jude quote it?
Yes, Jude quotes directly from it. You don't have to view 1 Enoch as inerrant scripture to recognize that it provides the essential theological vocabulary and worldview that the biblical authors possessed.
I see, so it's like a cultural dictionary for us.
Right. And in 1 Enoch, we get the expanded, detailed version of the brief, really mysterious story told in Genesis 6.
This is the story where the sons of God see the daughters of men and they step across the boundary between heaven and earth.
Yes, the ultimate cosmic boundary violation.
They take human wives and they produce these hybrid giant offspring called the Nephilim. I mean, honestly, it sounds like ancient mythology.
It does sound like mythology to our modern ears. But to the ancient biblical writers, it was historical reality.
And it had huge consequences, right?
Massive. The Jewish world of Jesus' day understood the catastrophic fallout of this event. The Watchers didn't just cohabit with women, they brought forbidden knowledge to humanity.
What kind of knowledge?
According to the Enochian tradition, they taught humans how to make weapons of war, how to use cosmetics for seduction, and how to practice sorcery.
So they basically fast-tracked human corruption.
Exactly. It was a catalyst for intense human depravity. The earth became totally corrupt. And Heiser makes this crucial point about the goal of the Messiah.
What does he say?
He argues that what happened in Genesis 6 had to be reversed as part of restoring the original Edenic vision.
So it wasn't just about Eden.
No. The Old Testament writers viewed the world as a hijacked planet. The mission of the Messiah had to solve this specific problem, the occupation by dark powers and the depravity they unleashed, not just the fall of Adam and Eve.
Let me make sure I am tracking with the mechanism here. The Watchers rebel, corrupt humanity, and produce Nephilim.
Right.
God judges the world with the flood to wipe out this corrupted bloodline. The physical bodies of the Nephilim are destroyed.
Correct.
But what happens to their spirits? I mean, they were half divine, right?
This is a vital piece of the puzzle. In the Second Temple Jewish worldview, when the physical bodies of the Nephilim died, their spirits didn't just vanish.
Because they weren't fully human.
Exactly. Because they were unnatural hybrids, part human, part divine, their spirits were cursed to roam the earth as disembodied entities.
Oh, wait. Are these the demons?
Yes. These spirits, according to our sources, are the demons of the New Testament.
That makes so much sense.
They are completely distinct from the original rebellious Watchers who were imprisoned, and they are distinct from Satan, the original rebel in Eden.
So these demons roam the earth, driving people to madness, sickness, and idolatry, just desperately seeking embodiment.
Because they lost their physical forms in the flood.
So when Jesus is casting out demons in the Gospels, he's literally doing cleanup work on the mess left behind by Genesis 6.
That is exactly what he is doing. He is walking into territory that the dark powers claimed as their own and demonstrating that a stronger king has arrived.
It's like he's asserting his authority over the squatters.
Right. For Second Temple Jews, the spread of human depravity was heavily blamed on the forbidden knowledge and the corrupt bloodlines initiated by the Watchers. Jesus' work cuts the root of this depravity. It nullifies their power.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Let's shift our focus to the incarnation itself.
Okay, let's go there.
If the world is occupied by rogue territorial gods, and the lingering spirits of the Nephilim are tormenting humanity, why the incarnation?
What do you mean?
I mean, if God wants to win this cosmic war, why does the second person of the Trinity take on a fragile, mortal human body? It seems like a strategic downgrade.
Right. From a raw power perspective, it looks weak. But our sources point us toward Hebrews chapter 2.
What's the argument there?
The writer of Hebrews is laser-focused on the mechanism of the incarnation. Why did God have to become a human being? Because the curse of death, the legal claim that Satan held, was over humanity.
Okay, because of Eden.
Yes. When Adam and Eve fell in Eden, they forfeited their immortality and became subject to death. Satan, in a sense, became the Lord of the dead. He held the power of death over humans.
Let's unpack this. Let me try an analogy to see if I'm getting this right.
Go for it.
Imagine a complex, corporate, hostile takeover. You have a massive company, let's call it Earth, but it's currently being run by a corrupt board of directors,
Oh,
the rebellious gods and watchers.
I'm following you.
Now, they only have power over the company because of a toxic debt clause, which is death and sin. And that clause is tied exclusively to the company's employees' humanity.
Right. The debt belongs to the humans.
The true owner, the new CEO, Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
wants to take his company back. But he can't just fire the board without violating the foundational corporate charter, which represents God's perfect justice.
He has to play by the rules he established.
Exactly. So the invading CEO bypasses the corrupt board entirely. He becomes a lowly employee.
He becomes human.
Right. He takes all that toxic debt onto himself, pays it off with his own life, and dissolves the clause. Once the clause of death is dissolved, the corrupt board loses all of its voting power.
The hostile takeover is complete.
Is that what Hebrews 2 is saying?
Yeah.
Because that's brilliant.
That is an excellent way to frame it. That is exactly the theology of Hebrews 2. He cannot simply act with raw power. He must act with perfect legality.
So, he has to become mortal.
Angels don't die. They are not subject to human mortality. So, an eternal sacrifice was required to atone for the sins of humanity, but that eternal being had to actually be capable of dying.
Therefore, the incarnation.
Therefore, the second person of the Godhead had to take on human flesh. As Heiser points out from the sources, Christ becomes human to target human sins, completely bypassing the fallen angels.
He doesn't offer them salvation at all.
No, the text says, surely it is not angels that he helps, but he helps the offspring of Abraham.
This is a massive paradigm shift. The atonement wasn't for the fallen watchers. It wasn't for the rebellious territorial gods of Babel.
Not at all. Their fate was sealed.
By becoming human, Jesus effectively bypasses the angelic rebels entirely. He targets humanity, the exact beings that the dark powers had enslaved.
And in doing so, he pulls the rug right out from under them.
By living a sinless life and dying as a substitute, Jesus breaks the legal claim of death over humanity. Satan loses his leverage.
Because his entire empire was built on the fear and reality of human death.
But wait. If Satan and the powers of darkness understood this legal mechanism, they never would have allowed the crucifixion to happen.
Exactly. This is why the cross was a trap.
I am stuck on this. You're telling me that these ancient, powerful, supernatural entities who had been running the world for millennia were completely duped.
Completely.
They just didn't see it coming. How is that even possible?
Because the plan of salvation was deliberately hidden, God didn't broadcast the mechanics of the incarnation.
Oh, interesting.
The Apostle Paul talks about this explicitly in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. He calls the gospel the hidden wisdom of God.
Hidden from who?
Well, he says, and this is crucial, that none of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory.
And Heiser says those rulers of this age aren't just Pilate and Herod.
Right. In Heiser's framework, they are the dark spiritual powers pulling the strings behind the earthly empires.
So the demons themselves were tricked.
Our sources clearly state that this secret and hidden wisdom of God was something that, had it been known to the powers of darkness, they would never have crucified the Lord.
So they thought they were winning.
They really did.
By orchestrating the crucifixion, they believed they were separating Jesus' soul from his physical body and sending him down into Sheol, the realm of the dead.
They thought, we got him. He's mortal. He dies just like the rest of them.
He will be trapped in the underworld forever.
Precisely. They thought killing Jesus was their ultimate victory. They didn't realize that by absorbing the unjust death of the sinless Son of God, the entire legal framework of their empire would shatter.
They pulled the trigger on a loaded gun pointed right at themselves.
It was cosmic judo, using their own momentum and malice against them.
So if the crucifixion was the trap, what was the bait? How did Jesus provoke these dark powers into executing him? I mean, he must have done something to trigger them.
He absolutely did. And to understand the mechanism of this provocation, our sources take us to a very specific geographic location, Mount Hermon.
Okay, geography. Why does that matter?
Geographic theology is essential here. In the ancient world, geography wasn't just about where things were, it was about who ruled there.
Ah, territory again.
Right. Mountains were consistently viewed as the abodes of the gods. And Mount Hermon, which is located in the northern region of Bashan, was ground zero for supernatural evil.
Ground zero. Why Hermon specifically?
According to the Jewish tradition in 1 Enoch, Mount Hermon was the exact location where the Watchers originally descended to enact the rebellion.
Oh, wow. So that's where they landed.
Yes, it was the place where they swore an oath to corrupt humanity.
So it's basically the headquarters of the enemy cartel.
It is the deepest heart of enemy territory. The region of Bashan itself was heavily associated in ancient literature with the gates of the underworld.
The gates of hell.
Yes, the domain of Bel, the Lord of the Dead. It was the most spiritually dark, hostile region imaginable.
So what does this all mean for Jesus' story? Look at what he does. Just before he begins his march to Jerusalem to die, he travels to this exact region.
He goes straight to the lion's den.
He goes to Caesarea Philippi, right at the base of Mount Hermon. This was a city dominated by a massive rock formation with a deep cave, which the Greco-Roman world literally called the gates of hell.
It was a massive center for pagan worship.
Jesus stands at the literal geographical gates of hell, and he asks his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" Peter says, "You are the Christ."
And Jesus responds with a huge statement.
He says, "On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it."
Let's look really closely at that phrase, the gates of hell shall not prevail.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
For centuries, we have treated that like a defensive posture. We picture the church as a fortress, and hell is attacking us, but our walls will hold.
Like we're just surviving the onslaught.
Exactly. But gates are not offensive weapons. Gates do not attack you.
Right, gates keep things locked in.
Yes. Jesus is painting a picture of an aggressive, invading church. He is standing at the headquarters of the enemy cartel and declaring, "My church is going to batter down your gates, and your defenses will not hold against us."
That completely flips the script.
And then he does something even more provocative right after that. He takes Peter, James, and John, and he goes up the mountain, Mount Hermon, for the transfiguration.
Wait, the transfiguration happens on Hermon. Why Hermon? Why not Mount Sinai or Mount Zion, places associated with Yahweh?
Because he is planting his flag. He ascends the very mountain where the Watchers descended to ruin the world.
Right where it all started.
And there, he reveals his true divine glory. He peels back his humanity, and he shines like the sun. Moses and Elijah appear, representing the law and the prophets.
So he's bringing the heavy hitters.
He is. As Heiser points out in the sources, when Jesus chose to go to Mount Hermon to be transfigured, he was claiming it for the kingdom of God.
This is unbelievable. Jesus is walking to the headquarters of the enemy, kicking in the door, shining a blinding, terrifying light, and basically saying, I'm taking my earth back.
He is taunting them.
This territory is mine. The reclamation has begun.
Yeah.
And how do the powers react?
They absolutely panic. It is a deliberate, provocative declaration of war. And if you follow the gospel chronologies, you see the immediate effect.
What happens next?
After the events at Mount Hermon, the narrative shifts. Jesus immediately sets his face toward Jerusalem. The conflict escalates violently.
The powers realize what he's doing.
The dark powers realize Jesus is making a move to reclaim the nations, so they marshal their human pawns.
The religious leaders, Judas, the Romans.
Right, and they orchestrate his death. They act violently, thinking they're stopping him, but in reality, Jesus baited them.
He provoked them into setting the exact trap that would destroy them.
Yes.
So the powers take the bait.
Yeah.
They crucify him. Jesus dies. His body is placed in the tomb, but his spirit goes to the realm of the dead.
This is where things get really intense.
We really need to dive deep into what happens between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, because Heiser relies heavily on some of the strangest, most debated passages in the New Testament to explain this.
They are definitely weird passages for modern readers.
I want to look specifically at 1 Peter 3. This is the text where Peter says that Jesus went and preached to the spirits in prison.
Ah.
For years, I've heard interpretations of this. Did Jesus go to hell to give dead humans a second chance at salvation? Or is this, the Catholic concept of the harrowing of hell, where he goes to rescue the Old Testament saints?
Those are common modern interpretations, but they completely ignore the vocabulary and the worldview of Peter.
Okay, set me straight. What's the vocabulary?
Let's look at the morphology of the Greek here. In 1 Peter 3, Peter uses the Greek word pneuma for spirits.
Okay, pneuma.
In the New Testament, when pneuma is used by itself without qualifiers, it is almost exclusively used for non-human spirits, angels or demons.
Oh, really?
Yes, it is distinct from human souls, which are usually referred to with the word psyche.
So he's not talking about dead people.
No. Furthermore, Peter says these spirits are in a prison. The Greek word is phylake. In Jewish literature, dead humans go to Sheol or Hades, but they are never said to be in this specific type of cosmic prison.
If they aren't human souls in Sheol, who are they? Who is in this prison?
Peter tells us exactly who they are in the very next verse. He says these were the spirits who were disobedient in the days of Noah.
The days of Noah.
Wait,
He is explicitly connecting this to Genesis 6.
the fallen watchers.
The fallen watchers of Genesis 6.
Yeah.
The ones who rebelled and produced the Nephilim. The book of 1 Enoch says explicitly that God bound them and threw them into a subterranean prison, Tartarus, to await final judgment.
So these spirits in prison are the fallen watchers, the original architects of human depravity.
Yes, and Jesus descends to them between his death and resurrection.
To do what? Offer them grace.
No, he doesn't go down there to hold an evangelistic crusade. The word for preached here is ekerexen, which means to proclaim as a herald.
Oh, like a town crier making an announcement. Exactly. He isn't offering them salvation.
What is he doing then?
He is announcing their doom.
Wow.
He is showing up in their Tartarus prison to say, you thought my crucifixion was your victory. You thought you had won. Look again. I am here. I hold the keys, and your sentence is permanent.
That is just staggering.
Our sources make this very clear. Jesus descends to these same spirits in prison to tell them they are still defeated despite his crucifixion.
Between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, while the disciples are weeping and hiding, thinking it's all over, Jesus is doing a victory lap in the deepest, darkest prison of the fallen gods.
That's a great image.
He is literally rubbing their noses in his triumph.
That is exactly the ancient Christian understanding, and we see this confirmed in 2 Peter 2 and the book of Jude, which explicitly highlight this motif.
What do they say?
They talk about the angels who sinned, who left their proper dwelling, being kept in eternal chains in gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day.
So they are completely locked into this Enochian Genesis 6 worldview.
Yes. Peter and Jude understand that Easter isn't just about human forgiveness, it's about the final judgment of these ancient rebellious powers.
This connects directly to baptism as well, doesn't it?
It does, very strongly.
Because in 1 Peter 3, right after Peter talks about the spirits in prison, he transitions into talking about how baptism saves you.
Which throws a lot of modern readers off.
Oh, totally. For a modern evangelical, that transition feels totally disjointed. Like, what does Jesus yelling at imprisoned angels have to do with me getting dunked in water?
It feels disjointed to us because we view baptism purely as a personal testimony, a symbol of having our sins washed away.
We treat it like a nice, quiet ceremony on a Sunday morning.
Right. But to the early church, baptism was a declaration of war. It was a loyalty oath to the risen king, sworn right in the face of the defeated dark powers.
A loyalty oath.
Yes. In the ancient church, before you were baptized, you would literally turn to the west, the direction of the setting sun, associated with darkness, and verbally renounce Satan and his angels.
Seriously, they would face a specific direction.
Yeah, and then you would turn to the east and pledge allegiance to Christ. As our source material states, every baptism is therefore a reiteration of the past and future doom of the watchers in the wake of the gospel.
That is so intense.
When you went under the water, you were aligning yourself with Jesus' descent and victory over the powers of death. And when you came up, you were declaring that the fallen gods have no legal claim on you anymore.
You have officially defected to the winning side.
Precisely.
We've covered the trap of the cross and the descent into the prison. Let's talk about the resurrection itself. Sunday morning, the stone rolls away. What mechanically shifts in the unseen realm at this exact moment?
The resurrection is the moment of absolute devastating triumph. When Jesus rises from the dead, he doesn't just wake up in a tomb, he dethrones the lords of the underworld.
How so?
Well, our sources point to this fantastic imagery in Revelation. Jesus appears to John and says, "I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades."
He has the keys.
Heiser explains this in terms of ancient cosmic geography. He says that Jesus descended into the realm of the dead and is taking the lunch money from death and Hades.
Taking their lunch money, I love that. He kicks in the door of the underworld, looks at death and Hades, which the ancient world viewed as actual demonic entities, and takes the keys right out of their hands.
They're out of a job.
The toxic debt clause is dissolved. The hostile takeover is finalized.
And this legal and spiritual victory echoes backward in time, directly dismantling the two great rebellions we talked about earlier, Genesis 6 and Babel.
Okay, let's trace that Babel thread.
Sure.
If Babel was the moment God disinherited the nations and handed them over to these corrupt territorial gods, how does Easter reverse that? What is the mechanism?
It reverses it by launching a new kingdom that aggressively reclaims those exact nations.
How does that start?
Think about what happens right after the resurrection. Jesus gives the Great Commission, go and make disciples of all nations.
All nations, not just Israel.
That isn't just a generic command to travel. He is saying, go into the territories ruled by the fallen sons of God and take my people back.
He's sending out his army.
And then at Pentecost, the mechanism is fully activated. The Holy Spirit comes down. What happens?
People start speaking in tongues.
Yes, but look at the specific context. Jews from all over the known world are gathered in Jerusalem, and suddenly they hear the gospel preached in the languages of the very nations that were disinherited at Babel.
Oh my goodness, it's a direct reversal.
Pentecost is the exact mirror image of Babel. At Babel, God confused the languages to scatter the nations and hand them over to darkness.
And at Pentecost, God uses languages to gather the nations back to himself through the Spirit.
Exactly. The resurrection and the giving of the Spirit are the starting gun for God's cosmic reclamation project. He is taking his earth back from the fallen gods, one soul, one community at a time.
And this ties into Psalm 2 as well, right? Our sources mention Psalm 2 as a cornerstone text for this cosmic conflict.
Yes, Psalm 2 is huge here. It depicts the nations and their rulers, which includes both the human kings and their dark spiritual overlords, conspiring against Yahweh and his anointed Messiah.
Plotting together.
But God just laughs at them. He installs his king on Zion. He says to the Messiah, ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron.
And the resurrection is the moment Jesus is installed as that king.
Yes. But what's truly radical is how the New Testament applies this. In Revelation, Jesus promises that human believers who overcome will actually share in this messianic rule.
Wait, we share it?
We will be given the rod of iron to rule the nations. We will displace the old fallen gods.
We take their seats. The resurrected human beings, who the dark powers tried to enslave and destroy, end up taking the very council seats that the rebellious gods forfeited.
Precisely. The resurrection guarantees their total displacement. Remember, the demons roaming the earth are the disembodied spirits of the dead Nephilim.
Right, they are fighting desperately for territory.
But the resurrection of Jesus proves that God's new global Eden is breaking into the world. And in that new Eden, the glorified human believers will rule. Jesus' victory guarantees that these demonic spirits will not share living space with humanity in the new world. Their time is incredibly short.
This raises an important question, then, for those who followed the modern evangelical framing of Easter. What do we synthesize from all this?
That's a fair question.
What is lost if we ignore this supernatural worldview? And what is gained if we embrace it?
Well, without this lens, the Easter story, while still bringing the beautiful truth of personal forgiveness, can feel somewhat flat.
Like it's missing its dimension.
It can feel purely transactional. Jesus paid a debt so I can go to heaven when I die. It's very individualistic. And frankly, without this lens, you have to ignore or awkwardly explain away a lot of the weird stuff in the Bible.
Which we tend to do.
The bizarre stories of demons, the intense focus on geography like Mount Hermon, the weird passages in Peter about spirits in prison, the obsession with angels and the divine council. They just don't fit into a strictly individualistic transactional theology.
They become footnotes or oddities. You end up reading a sanitized, truncated Bible. You miss the epic scale of what is actually happening.
But with this lens, believers gain a robust, epic theology. They realize they are not just saved from sin, they are saved for a cosmic reclamation project.
That completely reorients your purpose.
The ultimate goal of salvation isn't just floating on a cloud playing a harp in an ethereal, disembodied heaven. The goal is the restoration of the original Edenic vision.
Heaven coming to earth.
Believers are being prepared to displace the fallen gods, to inherit the nations, and to co-rule a restored global Eden alongside the resurrected Christ. It expands the gospel from a personal transaction into a sweeping cosmic victory.
You realize you are part of a massive divine resistance movement. You are reclaiming occupied territory. You aren't just waiting around to die your life. Your prayers, your community, it is all active spiritual warfare against a defeated kingdom.
That is the heart of the message.
And that brings us to a final provocative thought for you to take away today. We started by talking about a heist, right? A cosmic ambush where the forces of darkness thought they had won.
They were so sure of it.
They look at the bloody cross, at the suffering and the absolute defeat of Jesus, and they thought it was their greatest victory. But with all their ancient knowledge, they couldn't see the victory of God hiding inside that very defeat.
It was completely hidden from them.
So look at your own life. Where might God's victory be quietly at work in the seemingly defeated, broken, or suffering areas of your life right now?
That's a powerful question.
If God can use the ultimate injustice of the crucifixion to spring a trap that dismantled the kingdom of darkness, what is he doing in the dark places of your story?
That is the power of the Easter story when viewed through this expanded lens. It changes how we see suffering, and it changes how we see ultimate victory. We are participating in the reversal of the cosmic rebellion.
Absolutely. We encourage you to go back and reread the Gospels with this supernatural map in hand. Look at the geography, look at the demons, look at the cross, and see the cosmic war playing out behind the curtain. It will forever change how you experience the Easter story.